tough and they're really rough and nothing's working, but there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that because you don't know who you're going to meet.
Welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast. My name is Anna, but you can call me Anci, and thank you so much for tuning in. Binge on Self-Love podcast is about navigating binge eating disorder struggles, disordered eating, and negative body image. Although I share my personal experience with having a negative body image, eating disorders, and I do uncover bits of my personal story, this podcast is not as much about me as it is about you. Beautiful human beings who struggle, who fight, who grow, and who evolve every single day. This podcast is for anyone who wants to feel supported on their recovery journey and simply for anyone who's trying to improve their relationship with themselves. I believe together we can turn something so negative, such as binge eating, into something more positive and hopefully go from binging on food and self-hatred to binging on self-love. Subscribe to the Binge on Self-Love podcast on your favorite platform and tune in every Tuesday for a new episode.
But there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that because you don't know who you're going to meet.
Disclaimer: Binge on Self-Love podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It doesn't provide professional medical advice and it is not a substitute for diagnosis or treatment. In this podcast, we cover the topic of eating disorders, so if you find this topic triggering, it may be better for you not to listen to this podcast. Always make sure to put your mental health first. Hello everyone, welcome to the Binge on Self-Love podcast. My name is Anna, but you can call me Anci, and I'm your host. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to quickly remind you that you can keep sharing with me and my listeners your recent achievements, your proud moments, your recovery progress, simply anything that made you feel happy and proud so we can spread more positivity within our community. It can be anything. It can relate to body image, recovery process, self-love journey, growth, change of habits, choosing yourself and your own happiness, something that you feel grateful for or something that just made you feel really happy that day, whatever it may be. I'll share a few of your stories at the beginning of each episode just to share your amazing journeys and spread motivation and positivity and inspiration within this podcast and its community. If you would like to share your achievements with me and my Binge on Self-Love podcast listeners, feel free to email me at anci@bingeonselflove.com or DM me on Instagram at bingeonselflove, or you can visit bingeonselflove.com/note. That's bingeonselflove.com/NOTE and fill a short form with what you're grateful and happy for, and maybe you will hear your achievement on the next Binge on Self-Love podcast episode. The episode I have for you today is probably going to be controversial in multiple ways. What I'm about to cover today is something I feel very strongly about, and I do realize that it won't be everyone's cup of tea. And I also understand that not everyone will agree with me or will relate to what I say, and that's perfectly fine. As always, I want to emphasize that I'll be speaking from my experience and from my point of view. And as much as I don't want this episode to come across as judgmental or biased, I'm afraid it's not 100% possible if I want to share my thoughts on alcohol and self-love. I have a very strong opinion on alcohol. I don't drink alcohol for various reasons, which I'll talk about a little later. And some recent and not so recent events made me realize that I want to talk about this on this podcast. Alcohol is and has been part of our culture for thousands of years, and we live in times where alcohol is more accessible than ever. Sometimes I feel it's even easier to buy alcohol than to buy a bottle of water. And with the current inflation, it's both funny and sad that, for example, some kinds of vegetables are now more expensive than alcohol, at least in my country, which is ridiculous. You can buy alcohol on train, on a plane, in a cafe, in pretty much every restaurant or supermarket. It's everywhere and it's accessible. Whenever there's an event or a celebration, In 99.9% of cases, it's without a question that alcohol is going to be there. I was born and raised in a country that regularly ranks among the top 5 countries with the highest alcohol consumption per person per year, and that's very sad. Consuming alcohol, whether that means drinking occasionally or on a regular basis, is so normalized within our culture that most people consider you weird if you don't drink alcohol. And that's just one part of what I want to talk about today. This episode is not me hating on alcohol or throwing shade on anyone who drinks alcohol, not at all. I rather want to speak from the perspective of someone who chooses not to drink alcohol for different reasons, and what part can alcohol play in self-love and self-worth. So without further ado, let's get into today's episode. I'm sure so many of you will be able to relate to this, but growing up, I don't remember a single celebration or gathering or an event where there wouldn't be alcohol served. It was always there, whether it was beer or wine or something else, you could always rely on having something to drink if you wanted to. As I've mentioned in the intro, I was born in the Czech Republic, which ranks among the top 10 countries with the highest alcohol consumption per person per year, pretty much every single year. We are a nation of beer production and beer consumption, and that means that alcohol is super popular, accessible, and always available at any event, any gathering, any celebration, or whatever else. I know just hearing myself speaking, this is going to sound so closed-minded, and it's going to sound that I hate alcohol and that alcohol is evil, which is not true. That's not what I think. But my goal is to provide you with maybe a slightly different perspective that you wouldn't maybe really think about otherwise. I choose not to drink alcohol for different reasons, and whenever I tell someone, I get bombarded with questions about why I don't drink alcohol. I've dealt with a lot of pressure from people around me to have a drink with them, even though I didn't want to, even though I said I didn't want to. And I've also witnessed someone really close struggle with an active alcohol addiction. Our relationship with alcohol and any drugs, for that matter, is formed by so many things. The environment, the culture we were born and raised in, the groups of people we hang out with, and opinions and values we share, the society we live in, and that relationship, like any other relationship, evolves and changes over time. If I had to count how many drinks in my life I've had, and by a drink I mean either a shot or a cocktail or simply any sip of alcohol, I think the number would be around 15 to 20 drinks. I've never been a fan of alcohol, I never really liked the taste of it, and I never liked the way it made me feel. My opinion on alcohol and the decision to not drink alcohol evolved in time. It was never about waking up one day and making that decision that I'll never drink alcohol ever again. I simply started to refuse any offers for a drink until I realized that years went by without me touching alcohol, and it works for me. The last time I had a drink was a couple of months ago on a vacation where I had, I think, 1 or 2 cocktails on the beach. And before that, it was years that I wouldn't have an alcoholic drink. Some of the most significant things that I believe played their part in my relationship with alcohol have been fear of what is this thing going to do to me, fear of losing control over myself and my actions, and also fear of liking it, to be honest. I was scared of the idea, what if I like drinking and the state of being influenced so much that I won't be able to stop. Another thing was seeing so many people around me getting wasted and being sick and doing things they later regret or they don't remember doing at all from a very early age. And I didn't want to be like that. And I don't like seeing how much alcohol can change people right in front of your eyes. And I also believe that just because you are drunk or under influence, that's not an excuse to treat other people like shit or to do shitty things or to do shitty decisions. Next thing is my past with binge eating and binge eating disorder, with obsessing about weight loss and about working out. And I'm afraid that with my personality that is prone to addictive and obsessive behavior, at least from what I think, I'm afraid it would be too easy for me to create some sort of dependency on alcohol. I don't know, but I think, and it would be much more difficult for me to find a healthy boundary, so I would much rather stay out of it. Binge eating disorder was, besides many things, my way out of problems. It was a tool how to get away from the negative feelings I've had towards myself, and I don't want alcohol or any other drug to become that tool for me at any part in life. And struggling with binge eating disorder for so long, I would much rather deal with my emotions and problems in a healthier way. And finally, probably the strongest reason is witnessing someone close and someone I love battle with an alcohol addiction. What I want to emphasize is that you, do whatever works for you. I'm not judging anyone, even though it probably sounds exactly that I judge someone. And I get it. I don't think alcohol is evil per se, but it still is a drug like any other. And I feel like we sometimes forget about it or overlook it. And just like with any other drugs, we can develop an alcohol dependency. And where I think we have room for improvement as a society is that alcohol is so normalized. It's in pretty much every TV show, every movie, every reality show, on every party, at every event. I think balance is the key to everything, but I also think that it can sometimes be difficult to find a balance between what we want to do and what we think we should do. Sometimes it can be hard to make sure you put yourself and your needs first before any social expectations or habits, no matter how normalized it may be. No one should feel pressured to drink alcohol if they don't want to. Everyone should have a right to choose not to drink, whatever their reason might be, without the need to explain themselves. We all want to fit in with our social circle. We all want to feel accepted by other people, and that's not often easy if we choose not to drink when everyone else is drinking, or even more if people are used to you drinking alcohol and then you suddenly choose not to. I think that saying no to alcohol, if that's your choice, can be a form of self-love. I really do believe that, no matter how stupid that may sound. I believe that choosing what you want to do or what you don't want to do and then acting upon it is a form of self-love because you choose to put yourself and your values before pressure from society and before a label of it's normal to have a drink and before some expectations from other people. Yeah, it's normal to have a drink, but you know what? It's also normal not to have a drink. And it's also normal to go out with friends and have an amazing night without having a drink. You may be thinking, why am I making this such a big deal? But where I'm from and where I live, drinking alcohol is so normalized that people are surprised if you don't drink. And people are asking you why, and they're trying to wrap their head around it. And some of them make fun of you, and some even try to convince you to have a drink. And it's been difficult for me at first too, because I didn't like explaining to people my choice and what's the reason behind it. And when I got a little older, people's reaction to me refusing a drink was, "You're pregnant, aren't you?" Like, seriously, people, that's what you're going to ask? I'm 29 now, and the older I get, the more I start to value my health and my body. And I just don't like the idea of drinking and then being tired or even sick the next day. I'm talking about getting wasted a lot in this episode, and I do realize that you can drink without getting that drunk, but still, it's not my thing. It's not something I want to do. I simply don't see alcohol as something that would bring me anything that would help me in any healthy way. And I want you to remember that whatever your reason for not drinking is, it is good enough reason, and you don't have to feel obligated to explain people or even argue with them. Another thing that I need to mention when it comes to alcohol is the pressure. Pressure from society, pressure from your peers, your friends, your colleagues, or anyone else. We as humans want to fit in, and at a certain points in life, we obviously feel like fitting in is the only thing that matters. I'm speaking teenage years, I'm talking fit in a group of friends, of your partner. I'm talking fitting in a new workplace. And if we ourselves choose not to drink alcohol, but then we are in a group of people where we want to fit in, we may feel the pressure that maybe we should have a drink. People usually don't even assume that you wouldn't be drinking. And sometimes they don't even take no for an answer. Some people even go as far as thinking that if they keep pushing long enough, they're gonna pursue you to have a drink. I must say that in my experience, people often made it very obvious that they thought I was weird for not drinking. And you have to explain yourself all the time. Or, I mean, you don't have to explain, but you just often feel like you should explain to other people why you won't have that drink. I've never met with a reaction that wouldn't ask for an explanation of why I don't drink. Usually it goes like, have you ever been like this? I'm sure you drink on these and these types of occasions, don't you? I'm sure you do drink sometimes, right? Which is very weird if you think about it. Imagine someone would offer you a piece of chocolate and you're like, no thanks. And usually people take no for an answer and they move on. They wouldn't question you or your choice, but with alcohol, for some reason, it's so different. I realize that it is subjective and it depends on what groups of people you hang out with. Some are more tolerant than others and some would not question any of your choices, so it really depends on what your experience is. My experience is that most people act surprised if I tell them that I don't drink. Some people don't believe it, some people make fun of me, but at the end of the day, it's not other people's reaction that matters, but it's how you feel about it, and you have the freedom to choose whatever works for you. One of the arguments of people why you should have that drink is to have fun. And when you tell people you don't drink, they automatically assume you're no fun, because for most people, alcohol equals fun. That again is highly subjective, but I am capable of having fun without alcohol or any other drug for that matter. I can hang out with people I love and care about. I can go out with my friends and dance for hours and make jokes and have fun. Again, all without alcohol. If you're constantly being flooded with questions about why you're not drinking, I can imagine it can come to your mind if it wouldn't be easier to just have that drink to stop having these conversations each and every time you go out. To play the devil's advocate, maybe people ask from pure interest and they want to know, or maybe even they themselves think about drinking less or not drinking at all. The point of this episode is not to point at people who choose to drink alcohol and shame them and say they're bad or whatever, because that's not what I think and that would be very stupid of me to do. But I want to showcase my point of view and my experience with not drinking alcohol and maybe encourage anyone out there who also doesn't drink or is thinking about maybe drinking less or not drinking at all, but feels the pressure of society and people around us. And that's sad because you shouldn't feel pressured to drink alcohol by any means. Do I believe it's possible to have a healthy relationship with alcohol? Sure, yeah, I think that's possible. But I also think that the edge between healthy and unhealthy relationship with alcohol can be indistinct. And I think nobody should feel pressured to drink alcohol or feel obligated to just because it's normalized in our society and in our culture. After all, alcohol is a drug and it is addictive both physically and psychologically. I've mentioned earlier that I have witnessed, and I still do witness, someone close struggle with an active alcohol addiction. And I won't go into many details because that's not my story to share. But it's unbelievably painful to watch someone hurting themselves and killing themselves every single day. If that person refuses to get help and to get better, there's unfortunately nothing you can do. And that's extremely painful and sad. I know that alcohol addiction is the other end of the scale and that not everyone who's drinking alcohol is an alcoholic or will create dependency on alcohol, but seeing what it can do to someone you love and how damaging it can be, not just for them but for everyone around them, I simply can't feel any different about alcohol. Therefore, I think it's so important to care about your mental health, not feel ashamed of your problems, and not try to hide them or cover them and pretend that everything's fine when it's not. We don't have to go through everything alone, and we don't have to agree with something just because we feel obligated to. So whether you're thinking about reducing alcohol consumption, maybe you're sober curious and playing with the idea of not drinking, whether you're choosing not to drink or you choose not to drink but you don't want to put any certain label on it, please don't feel pressured to explain anyone anything. You don't owe anyone an explanation. If people ask you why you don't drink, you can just respond something like, I don't want to, or I simply don't. It may be uncomfortable at first, but you'll see that people you know will stop caring about whether you do or do not drink alcohol. And after all, it's your body and your decision. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you found today's episode at least a little interesting. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the Binge and Self-Love podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or any other platform. I'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, take care and talk to you soon. Bye!
You have to be your biggest fan. And when things are really tough and they're really rough and nothing's working, but there's something inside of you that says, I just have to follow that. Because you don't know who you